So now we're going to look at migration in particular, okay? So the first thing we need to talk about is the ecumene. I thought ecumene was a vocab word that y'all had, but they told me last period that you didn't have it. So the ecumene is just the livable part of the earth, okay? So this is where people are living. Antarctica, not part of the ecumene because people aren't living there, okay? So the permanent settlement of people across the earth. With my on-level kids earlier in this unit, we drew a map of where people first started out. Like the oldest fossils are found in Africa, and people slowly started moving, like migrating, like thousands and thousands of years ago. So they moved from Africa to the Middle East, and then from the Middle East, they went to Europe, they went to Asia, they went through Southeast Asia. And so that's how people first started spreading, okay? So they were moving to places that were livable. That's called the ecumene, all right? That second bullet point right there is the definition of migration, okay? So that's basically what migration is when people are picking up their stuff and permanently moving somewhere else. So they don't have the intention of going back to where they started from. If they did, that would be like tourism, right? If they were going to leave and go somewhere for a while and come back, that would be like tourism. So when people are permanently changing their address, moving without the intention of coming back, that is migration, all right? You got it?
No.
Oh my gosh. You can write down like in the bottom, underneath the slide where it says speaker notes. You can make notes there. Or you can add in a text box, whatever you want to do. Okay, I'm moving on. All right, so in thinking about migration, let's talk about how many times you guys have moved. Can anyone, yesterday I had a girl who moved 12 times. Can anyone beat 12? Count how many times you guys have moved. Tell me, how many times? Once, Caitlin? What else? Who else? Haley, how many times have you moved?
6 times.
6 times? Seriously? What the heck?
I think
5? Oh my gosh, you guys are only like 14.
3.
What the heck?
Yeah, 3.
My parents are still in the same house that I was brought home to as a baby. So I didn't move until I moved to college. And then all of my times that I moved is like in college, like 5 times. I'm older than you guys. Who else? 6, 5, 3. Can anyone beat 6 in this class? Maddie, how many times have you moved?
4.
4? Crap. That's a lot. Okay, so think about it. You don't have to say it out loud, but think about if it was a traumatic move or an exciting move. Maybe it was traumatic for you if you were like super young and you were having to leave your friends, right? Or whatever. But when we think about traumatic in this instance would be like something really bad is happening to make your family move. I'm going to guess that most of us in here moved because our parents had some type of job, right, that brought them here. How many of you were born and raised here in Frisco, like started Frisco schools? Like that number keeps getting less and less with each class. So not a whole lot of us were born here in Frisco and started school in Frisco. So a lot of you guys came from other places. And I'm going to assume that most of you came here because your parents probably got a job near Frisco or in Dallas or something, right? Am I on the right track? I would think most of us probably did that because parents probably got jobs, okay? But for other people can move for traumatic reasons too. What would be an example of a traumatic, like why would something be traumatic if they had to move? What, Carly?
If there was like earlier in history, if there was like a war or something.
Okay, yeah, so maybe like a war caused your family to move. What else? What else could be traumatic, Haley?
Natural disasters.
Yeah, like disasters. Sure, natural disasters. Okay. Yeah, so maybe you lost everything, right? And you had to leave for different reasons, right? A hurricane, a war, maybe your house is bombed. I don't know. Those would be traumatic reasons, right? Probably none of us, hopefully none of us had to experience a traumatic something, but we're not going to talk about that because I don't want to know. That would be too sad. But that kind of goes along with the next bullet point too. Why would people move or make a perilous journey across thousands of miles? What does perilous mean?
Like difficult.
Difficult or dangerous, yeah. Okay. So why would people risk their lives to leave their home?
If they're in danger.
Yeah, if they're in danger, so like what is happening there?
War.
So like war or disease or something, right? Like if something was really bad and you like it wasn't going to be a good thing for you to stay, you would risk that, right? If it wasn't going to be safe for you to stay in your home, like you would probably risk it to leave, okay? So today lots of people are continuing to move today. And so we already talked about things like jobs, right? What are some other reasons people would move today?
Better schools.
Yeah, education. What else?
War.
Yeah, war. But since we already talked about that, what's something else? What?
Freedom.
Yeah, freedom. That's a good one. Okay, so lots of reasons why people will move. All right. So let's talk about the difference between forced migration and voluntary migration. So forced migration is going to be when someone or some group of people are in power or they have authority, maybe like a government, okay? If your government was corrupt or something, when someone is telling you, you have to move, you are going to have to leave this place because we say so, or because we're in charge and we don't want you here, so you have to get out, okay? So that's going to be forced migration. A big example of forced migration that always comes to my mind happened in World War II. What was it? Yeah, what's it called? The Holocaust, okay? The Holocaust is a really good example of this. Because the Nazis came into power, right? They had the authority, and they went in and forcibly removed the Jewish people from their homes, right? All across Europe. They were moving them to concentration camps or whatever the case was. Yeah, concentration camps or ghettos or whatever it was. Yes?
If they were moved, like, in Germany, within Germany, into concentration camps, would that be internally displaced persons or?
Yes,
forced
we're going to
migration?
get to that. Hold that thought. We're going to get to that in like the next few slides, okay? But good, we're going there. Not quite there yet. So, forced migration, when someone is making you move, right? The Nazis came into power. They removed the Jews from their homes against their will, right? And so that's how they were moved. Think like people in charge making you leave, okay? Forced migration. But on the opposite of that, voluntary migration is when someone is going to weigh their options, or basically it's going to be their choice, right? They're going to choose if they want to leave or not leave. So if we go back to the example, our personal examples of your families moving here to Frisco, at some point your parents probably had a conversation when you were kids that probably didn't happen in front of you, but they had a conversation where they were weighing their options, right? They were weighing if they should take this new job here in Dallas or Frisco or wherever, if it was going to be better than whatever they were leaving, right? Maybe more money, maybe better schools, maybe a bigger house, maybe whatever the case was. They were having to weigh their options of if it was going to be better than what they would be leaving, right? So that's a choice. Nobody was like holding a gun to their head saying, hey, you have to decide, are you moving to Frisco, right? It was a choice, probably voluntarily, where they chose what was going to be the better option, to stay or to go. All right, so that's voluntary. The third bullet point here says sometimes migration can be seen both ways. And this is kind of like a personal opinion, or how you want to argue it, how you want to view it. For me personally, I think that forced migration and voluntary migration are very different, because if someone is holding a gun to my head, if I'm a Jew and the Nazis come and knock in and say, hey, you have to leave, guess what? I'm going to go, right? Because they're telling me I have to go. And if I choose not to go, what's going to happen to me? If I'm a Jew and the Nazis are there, yeah, they're going to kill me, right? So to me, in my mind, like, that's not really an option, right? Because I'm not going to say, no, I'm not going to go, because I'm going to want to live. But some people will say, at the end of the day, everyone's going to have an option of if they want to stay or if they want to go, even if that staying option will result in death. To me, that doesn't make sense in my brain, because most people are going to want to live, right? But some people, maybe for the sake of arguing, whatever it is, some people might say, at the end of the day, a person will be able to choose. It will ultimately be their decision, aka it would be voluntary if they wanted to leave or stay. But personally, I don't think it is that way, because I think people would want to live, right? So I think that forced migration is a thing, and that people can force you to leave the place that you're from, you know? So it really just depends on how you look at it. It can be argued both ways, but for the sake of this class and for the exam and stuff like that, you need to be able to know the difference between forced and voluntary, okay? All right, so moving on. We have immigrant and immigrant. These are vocab words, correct? So immigrant with an E means what?
Leaving a country.
Yeah, leaving a country or exiting. Okay, immigrant with the E is to exit. Immigrant with the I is to do what? Go into. Okay, so immigrant with the E to exit, immigrant with the I to come into. So if I am moving from the U.S. to Mexico, I am an immigrant with an E to the U.S., but I'm an immigrant with an I to Mexico. So if I'm writing this sentence, it's going to sound the same, but it's actually going to be different. I am an immigrant, that's an E, immigrant to the U.S., but an immigrant with an I to Mexico. See? So it sounds the same, but two different meanings, right? E with an E is exiting, with an I is coming into. All right, that's an easy way to remember it. All right, we good? Easy stuff. All right, so let's look at some examples. Another example of forced migration. This is all forced migration examples. But the first one is the slave trade. So when the Europeans sailed on their boats to Africa, picked up all the Africans and made them come to Central and North America to work as slaves, that is obviously forced. Do you think that they wanted to leave? No, they didn't. Okay. So they made them come over and be slaves. That's an example of forced migration. That was not voluntary. They didn't willingly go across to be a slave, right? The next one is is Australia. What did Australia first start out as? A prison colony. Okay. So let's talk about the geography of Great Britain and what we know about Great Britain. What type of country is Great Britain? Yeah, it is very developed, right? What have they been powerful throughout history? Yeah, so they always had a large population, okay? So lots of people. And what type of, like, physically, geographically, what type of country is it? What do we know physically about it? What? Yeah, it is old, but think about the physical features. What's happening in the country? What type of country is it? McKenna, stand up there. Find Great Britain. You know where it is? Oh, that's Sweden. Move your hand to the left.
Right to the left.
Yep, that is Great Britain. Okay, so what is around it? Water. So it is a what? It is an island, okay? And we have a lot of people on an island. So to make room for people, they shipped off their convicts, okay? So all their prisoners, they just put on a boat, went to Australia, okay, to ensure that they had enough room for the people on this small island, okay? And they had a lot of people. So the prisoners went because they were told to, right? Like they put them on a ship and shipped them to Australia. So that was forced. They didn't have a choice in that. They were forcibly moved to Australia, okay? A good example here in the U.S. is with the Native Americans. What was that thing called that happened to the Native Americans? The Trail of Tears, okay? So Trail of Tears happened in the U.S. Who was the president again? Yeah, Andrew Jackson. Wow. Think back to your U.S. history days last year. So Trail of Tears, right? That is when the government removed all of the Indians from the East Coast and put them where? Yeah, Oklahoma in the Midwest, right, on reservations. So they made them move. Again, not the people's choice. And then we already talked about the Nazi and Jewish example. The last thing you need to know is counter migration. So counter migration is when like a migrant could be trying to move to a different country, but maybe there's a limit on how many migrants are allowed into the country, or whatever the case may be. There's not enough room for them, and so that government is going to force that person to go back to where they came from. Basically, this is called deportation. Okay. Deportation. Or counter migration. So they're sending them back. All right. So when we look at current examples today, we look at Syria, Afghanistan, and the Palestinians that are in Israel. Anyone know anything about these current countries and their conflicts? Anyone at all? What do you know about it, Lexi? Which one?
They're all, like, Israel's in the middle, and they're all surrounding Israel, and they all want to take over. Like, in the...
You're on the right track. Haley, help her out.
They don't really like have a main government, right? It's just like people that are like
Yeah,
people that
yeah. So on the right track. So Syria and Afghanistan, there is all of these places have a lot of turmoil, right? A lot of conflicts going on with all these different countries. Syria, I had a girl last period who I didn't actually realize was Syrian. Okay, so she explained it to the class and it was awesome. But she has a lot of personal connection, obviously, to the Syrian conflict. And we're going to get into Syria specifically, Syria and the Palestinian conflict more in Unit 4 when we come back from winter break. But basically, Syria, there are a lot of groups that are trying to take control over Syria. There's a president who's in power technically, and then there are extremist groups that are trying to overthrow the current president, but the president isn't necessarily considered good because they feel a lot of the Syrians think that he's corrupt and he's not doing enough to suppress the militant groups that are trying to overtake them. But then the militant groups want to take over, but that's also not a good idea either. So there's just a lot of war, a lot of conflict, lots of bombing going on. Nobody's really safe there. And then there's a ton of bystanders who are just caught in the middle in Syria. Okay, so people are leaving Syria like by the thousands. Okay, that's a really hot topic, like a very hot spot for conflict right now. Similar situation happening in Afghanistan, where there are extremist groups trying to take over in power. Government is not very strong right now, very weak, and so it is an easy target to try to overthrow, and there's lots of extremist groups trying to take over there as well. Okay, so that's in Afghanistan. And then we have Palestine, which Palestine is an area in Israel. The Palestinians and the Jewish Israelis have been arguing over this land for literally like thousands of years. So the Palestinians are a group of people who live in Israel. They want their own country, but Israel says that that's their land and has been their land forever. So there's a lot of arguments there too. And we're really going to get into the Palestinian conflict in Unit 4. But with all of these groups, there's a lot of conflict, okay? And all of these places are where? Middle East. Okay, so lots of conflict happening. People are trying to get out of there really quick. So when people are leaving, they're migrating. Okay, they're trying to migrate away from this this area. And there's kind of a process for this to happen. And we're going to start with what Ayush said, IDPs, okay? So you really need to know these 3 different steps that we're going to talk about, so make sure you're locked in. So the first one we're going to talk about is internally displaced people, or IDPs. When we were talking about internally and displaced, when we look at those words, what does internally mean? Inside. When we're talking about migration, it's going to be inside of what? A country, okay? Inside their country. So you're saying inside their country. What does displaced mean? What? Caitlin, what'd you say? Yeah, so they're moving, they're relocating, right? When they're displaced, you can't stay in your home. You're leaving your home, but you're staying inside your country. So no borders are crossed. when you are an IDP? So you're staying inside your country, you're displaced. You're not staying in your home, but you're not leaving the country yet. This would be like the first step. If there was a war going on or whatever the case is, you would move away if your town is being bombed, right? And then you'd try to get out. So this would be the first step, is IDPs. But you can also be an IDP in a developed country too, or in a place where no war is going on. How could you be an IDP if you were here in the U.S.? Think about it. Why would you have to leave your country or leave your home?
Lost your job.
No. Think of natural disasters. Okay, so think natural disasters. What happens when a hurricane hits? Think about Houston last year, right? When it was the start of school last year and Houston was hit by that hurricane, Harvey, right? And a lot of people moved to Dallas, or were in Dallas for a while, or around Texas, wherever they went, while they were fixing up their homes, right? They probably very few people left the actual country, right? Because that just doesn't make sense. They're just trying to get back to their homes, right? So they were internally displaced. They were staying inside the U.S. Not many people would have been like going to Mexico or anything, right? So they were internally displaced. They were not able to stay in their home, but they were still inside the U.S. Why would people be IDPs here in North Texas? What could cause us to be an IDP? Or in the Midwest? What happens in the Midwest? Or on the East Coast? Tornadoes here, right? Okay, what happens on the East Coast? Not East. Oh, sorry, I meant West Coast. Sorry, California. Earthquakes, fires, floods, right? So all of those reasons could cause you to be an IDP here in the U.S. where you couldn't stay in your home, but then you could eventually go back, right? So that wouldn't be cause for us to leave our country. We would just move for a little while and then hopefully come back, right? So that's an example of what a IDP would look like here in the U.S., okay? But if we are migrating because of something bad happening, because of the conflict or whatever, that could be the first initial step for you to get out of your country, okay? Would be moving away, but staying in a border, okay? The next part to this would be an asylum seeker. So if you are an asylum seeker, asylum in this case is not like crazy house or anything like that. You're not going to an insane asylum or whatever. Asylum means you are looking for protection from another country. From other country. Okay, so you might be able to get out of your country. So this is crossing borders. So you're in another country now. But the thing with asylum is, now that you have protection, you are not going to be forced to go back into your country that is super dangerous. You have the right clearance to be in this country that's going to provide you safety from whatever you left. And so you can be there, but when you have asylum, you're not a refugee yet. So what this looks like is that you're kind of stuck. You're stuck in this middle place because you're not a refugee, but you're also not going back to your country. So you are really kind of just stuck in this limbo. That's what we're going to write down, is limbo. So you're stuck in limbo because you're not fully legal yet. So you can't go get a job. You can't rent or buy a house. You can't go to school. You truly can't do a whole lot of anything because you're waiting to get your refugee status so that way you can begin all of that stuff. But until then, you're kind of just in this holding phase of where you can't really do a whole lot. So you probably will go to a refugee asylum camp that is usually funded and stocked and provided by the UN or more developed countries that provide that humanitarian aid. So they'll provide you with a basic food, water, shelter, clothes. So seriously, nothing fancy here, living in tents, and it's a holding phase. You can't do anything because you don't have you're not a real like citizen, or you haven't been approved yet for that. Okay, so you're in this weird like holding phase. Say you left Syria and you moved to Turkey, you could be living in this refugee camp for however long, but Turkey has to approve you to be there to become a refugee. So while you have asylum from there, you can't go start working a job and start making money. Or maybe you apply for refugee status in Germany or in France, because those are MDC countries in Europe that you could get to, right? So this asylum phase is truly like you are stuck in limbo, you're stuck in a holding phase until you get that status, okay? So it's kind of tricky. And then once you get to be a refugee, this means that you have full documentation and one day you will become a citizen. Okay, so the idea then is that once you are granted refugee status, then you can go get a job, then you can go to school, you can do whatever you want because you have the right paperwork that tells you, hey, yes, you can start to become a citizen now. So that looks different for every country, whatever the requirements are for you to become a citizen of that country. So it depends on where they're going to. But the idea then for a refugee would be to become a citizen of a new country because they left whatever was happening in their home country. Okay? Does that make sense? So those are the 3 steps. You really need to know how that process works. Because that is definitely like in the world all around us today, okay? And then if we look at trafficked and smuggled people, those are 2 other examples of migration. Smuggled people are where you probably are like paying someone to try to get you into another country illegally. Think like shoving people in 18-wheelers or in trunks, or trying to hide people, right, to get across a border. So that way they could be safe, or they're trying to leave whatever country they're in. So they're smuggling people across borders. Trafficked people are like the movie Taken. I don't know if you've all seen Taken, but it's where you're like abducted, right? You're taken from wherever you are, definitely like not voluntary. And usually it's like you're sold into like sex trafficking or like labor. They might sell you for like truly like as a slave, okay? All that stuff would be like trafficked, taken against your will, crossing a border, and then selling that person for whatever it is that they want. Normally it's like sex trafficking. So for not good reasons are you taken and then put into this like black market type of bad stuff happening, okay? So those are examples too of migration, forced migration, all right? Make sense? Did we write all of it down? Okay, good. All right, so really quick, we need to talk about push and pull factors. This is simple stuff. Push factors are negative, and this is also called a centrifugal force. So what are some bad reasons why people want to leave a country? What have we kind of talked about? War. What else are bad reasons? Disease. Natural disaster. What else? Bad reasons to make you want to leave.
No jobs.
Yeah, no jobs. What else?
Limited government.
Limited government. What else?
Economy bust.
Bad economy. What else?
Like education. qualification,
And healthcare. Yeah, I'm glad you talked about both of those. Bad education or healthcare. Okay, yeah. So all bad reasons that would make you want to move, right? So pull factors then are going to be the positive, centripetal with a P, forces that would make you want to go to a country, okay? So every push factor is going to have an opposite pull factor. So if we're looking at opposite pull factors, what would some of those be? Opposite of war is peace, yeah. Natural disasters, maybe like good geographical location, right? Good geography. No jobs. Lots of jobs, right? Economic opportunity. Limited government. What's the opposite of limited government? Established or free government, right? Bad economy, bad education, bad healthcare. Good things, right? Good economy, education, and healthcare. Okay? So it's simple stuff, right? Opposite of bad things are going to be good things. That's what's going to attract you. That's what's going to pull you to a country. Okay? And then the last thing we need to look at are Ravenstein's laws of migration. So this was in chapter 5, I believe you read about this last week. And I think that there are more than just 6. I think there's like 12 laws. But these are the main 6 that you kind of need to be familiar with. So if we start with number 1, you need to just know that every time there's going to be, or for the most part, when people leave a country or migrating away, there's probably going to be at least some people there will be a counter migration going into that country. So like if people are leaving Mexico to come to the U.S., there's also people leaving the U.S. to move to Mexico. Maybe they're retired. Maybe their job is making them go to Mexico. Whatever it is, there's going to be an opposite migration to that place as well, for the most part, right? Like, I don't know how many people are moving to Syria, but probably not a whole lot, but that's like because things are really bad there, right? But for the most part, there's going to be an opposite migration to that country as well, okay? For number 2, it says migrants will move a short distance. So it's really hard to up and move halfway around the world, right? Usually people who are going to move are going to migrate. They're going to move in step by step, okay, called step migration. This is all talked about in the book. But if someone's moving from Mexico to New York, most likely that family, those people would maybe move to like whatever, Texas first or something, and then maybe they'll move to Tennessee and then eventually to New York. Okay, that's step by step migration. If distance decay would be like if a bunch of families decide to move from Mexico to New York, maybe they all move to Dallas first, and then the further away it is, the distance decay is, the less likely all of those families are going to actually make it to New York. So that number is going to dwindle for how many people will actually end up making it to New York, okay? And then intervening opportunities would be like maybe they move to Dallas and then they get a really good job, right? And so maybe they don't end up going to New York because they have a good job in Texas now. Or maybe family moved to Texas or something happened to their family, and so maybe they're going to stay in Texas and not make it all the way to New York. So that would be just anything, intervening obstacles to keep them from going all the way there. Number 3, migrants who move longer distance away. So the further away, the more they will more likely choose a big city to go to. Why would people go to a big city? What is in the city?
More jobs.
Yeah, more jobs, right? So there's an economic opportunity here. And so you're not really going to move to a small town like Pilot Point where I live. People aren't going to move there from Europe because there's not a lot of jobs there. They would more likely move to Dallas, right? Or to New York City or to Chicago, wherever there are more jobs, okay? It just makes more sense because there's more economic opportunity there. Number 4 says urban residents are less migratory than people who live out in the sticks, okay? Because those people are already living in the cities, there's already lots of job opportunities. So if someone were to lose their job living in the city, it would be easier for them to turn around and find a different job in the city instead of looking somewhere out in a small town, right? So people in small towns are going to move quicker to bigger towns instead of people who are already in a big city, okay? Just makes sense because there's job opportunities, okay? And then number 5, families are less likely to move internationally than younger people. The way I explained this last period was, it is personally, it is my dream to go teach abroad one day. I would love to go to another country and teach. And 2 years ago, I thought I was going to do that. I thought I was going to up and leave and literally go live on an island and teach somewhere, and that would have been freaking cool. But the reason why I could have done that is because I'm not married and I don't have any kids, and it's easy for someone who's young to up and go, right? If I had been married and I had 3 kids or whatever the case was, that's more people that decision affects, right? And so you have to take those things into consideration. So it's easier for young single people to up and leave and move a farther distance or move internationally because there's less people to worry about, right? Like that decision would have been just on me if I had done that. Whereas if I had had a family, that would have affected more people, right? So internationally, it's going to be typically younger people. Now, when people are moving inside a country, typically it's going to be more females, younger females who move instead of more younger males. So younger males are more likely to move like internationally, and younger females will stay within a country. But again, still younger single people instead of moving families, okay? And then the last thing is that most people are going to move because of economic reasons. All right, which is kind of what has driven all of this Ravenstein's loss, okay? So whenever you see a question, a multiple choice question, or an FRQ or whatever it is, this is stuff that you will need to know. But I feel like this is pretty common sense type stuff, right? Like people are going to move because of job reasons, right? People are going to live in the cities because there are more jobs there. Who are the people who are going to move? The younger people, because families are harder to up and move. And when they do move, it's going to be in smaller steps instead of one big jump from really far away. Okay, so they are all kind of tied together when you sit and think about it. And I promise you, you will see questions like this on the exam, maybe the big exam at the end of the year, or on an FRQ. So just think it's really common sense type stuff, right? When you get down to the nitty gritty, it is why people are actually moving and just thinking about like where and how they're doing it. Okay? What's the next slide? Oh, push or pull. Okay, last thing. Push. Oh no, push isn't a plus. It's a minus. And pull are plus signs. So, what would be push and pull factors? Poverty is a what? A push. Armed conflict is a push factor. Military dictatorships. Push. Job openings. Grace, what is it? Push or pull? Pull, yep. Culture clashes. Ella? Yeah, push. So when cultures are conflicting, that could cause tension, aka like Syria. What's next? Hurricanes. Ashley?
Push.
Push. Good schools. Aiden?
Pull.
Pull. New homes. Vince?
Pull.
Pull, yeah. Democratic elections. Brooke?
Pull.
Yeah, pull. That's a good thing. And overpopulation, Connor?
Push.
Yeah, push. You don't want that. Okay? So pretty simple. You know what push and pull factors are. All right? The last thing we have... we're not going to watch that video. Nah, we got it. You can watch it another time if you want. The last period said it wasn't worth it.